right. Good evening, everyone. Let's see here. Just waiting for some people to come on into the space and populate the chat. All right, feel free to drop in the chat where you are repping and what you do for the culture. Let's get the chat activated. All right, Dr. J from the Boogie Down. All right. All right, we got Massachusetts, Chi-Town. All right, I am repping B More right now, originally from Philly. All right, Brooklyn stand up. All right, if you're just joining us, welcome to Por La Cultura. I'm going to ask you to just drop your wherever you're hailing from in the chat and what you do for the culture. All right, what's up, Denver? One of my favorite cities. All right, we got Central California. Dope. All right. All right, welcome to Por La Cultura. My name is Jamila Sams. I'm the founder of We Do It for the Culture, which is an evidence-based, culturally responsive, social emotional learning curriculum. And you are really in for an enlightening evening, centering all things Por La Cultura and learning more about social emotional learning and just some of the trials and tribulations that we're facing in 2026. And so before we get started, I just wanted to kind of share a little bit. We know that social emotional learning, hip hop culture is all about storytelling. So I kind of wanted to just share a little bit with you all about kind of how I became, familiar and, really immersing myself and learning more as it pertains to Por La Cultura. So my father passed away a few years ago, but before he passed away, he had a ritual. He would come home after work and sit in his big easy chair downstairs in our house, and he had this cabinet full of albums, and his go-to artists were Nina Simone, Sam Cooke, and others. But there were days that he would introduce me to other artists like Buena Vista Social Club or Celia Cruz, and he would call me downstairs to not just listen to the albums, but also to learn. And he taught me that culture isn't a place that you visit, it's something that you carry. And what I came to understand is that our stories do not live in silos. However you identify, whether it be Hispanic, Chicano, Latinx, Taino, Arawak, Iroquois, Afro-Caribbean, our histories are braided together like cornrows. Our histories are braided together like strands of maize. My father ran a printing company, and he worked alongside scholars like Ivan Van Sertima, Henry Louis Gates Jr., and through them, I learned about the Olmecs, those massive head-shaped statues from the pre-colonial era, which is now in southern Mexico. And through that learning, something really powerful became clear. Culture has always been a meeting of the minds, and there's evidence suggesting connections between the indigenous peoples of the Americas and the travelers from different regions in Africa. And they didn't just exist side by side. They exchanged, they built, they influenced, they contributed to what we call now a mother culture. So aligning with civilizations like the Mayan and the Aztec. And I remember visiting the pyramids in Mexico and standing near one of those pyramids. I learned how the Aztecs engineered their voices to reach the masses with clarity. They were the masters of communication, astronomy, mathematics, and they were also innovators. And that brilliance didn't stay in the past. It lives in the agriculturalists who understand the land. It lives in the pride of the muralists. It echoes the songs of the Taino and the Arawak people, and the culture lives on. Por La Cultura. Their joy is a revolutionary act. But today, we also see the weight carried by communities descended from the indigenous people of the Americas. We see systems that attempt to diminish their humanity, separating families, disrupting connections, silencing voices. And they try to break the echo chambers of home, communication, safety, and love. And that's why social emotional learning is not an add-on. It's not something you take off the shelf and put it back. It's something that is essential. It's something that is humane. Because in America today, our students are just learning about math and science. They're learning how to thrive. They're learning how to belong. We teach them that when the world tries to quiet them, they come from people who moved mountains, who engineered sound and society to make sure that they were heard. That is Por La Cultura. It is a reminder that our students are not marginalized. They are reflections of amazing ancestors. And when their cultures are respected, they don't just engage in school, they rise to the occasion. So welcome all of you tonight to the conversation Por La Cultura. I'm so excited to introduce the guests that we have tonight. And I'm going to start by sharing some of the amazing things that our guests are doing. Starting off with the youngest in charge, Luis. Luis Araluce is a bilingual senior attending Colorado High School charter in Denver, Colorado. Luis is originally from Mexico City and has been in Denver since his childhood. He is a two-time environmental fellow. All right, Luis. Honor roll student. And blooming youth activist. His skills and interests are in climate science and technical skills such as welding. Super dope. So happy to have you here tonight, Luis. Next up, we have Mario Reyes the fourth. Mario, this is not in his bio, but I'm just shouting Mario out because Mario is one of the first educators and curriculum designers to contribute to We Do It for the Culture. And I'm just so honored to have you here tonight, Mario. Mario is a community and youth organizer in Denver, Colorado. As a middle school and high school educator of 8 years, Mario brings literacy and critical thinking skills into the world of environmental justice and historical analysis. Mario has designed curriculum and lessons plans for We Do It for the Culture since 2021. Currently, Mario is a graduate student at the University of Colorado at Denver in the Urban and Regional Planning Department. He works a part-time position at a local high school where he coaches teachers in critical literacy. He also runs a 6-month environmental fellowship program at the high school in which students investigate climate change at local and global levels through engagement with community organizations and personal internships. Mario also participates in developing cooperatives and is the executive director of a Denver eco-socialist magazine called I can never say that word.
Dystopian.
Thank you. I can never say
Dystopian
that word.
times.
Don't judge me, y'all. Mario is originally from Austin, Texas, and is the proud son, brother, and friend. All right. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Justice Lopez, is a son, brother, husband, mama's boy, chocolate chip cookie lover, me too, and MC extraordinaire. His home is diasporic from the city of Village Charm to the melodies of the coqui in Puerto Rico. His home is where his home is, and he currently lives in the Boogie Down Bronx, New York, where he is rooted in rhythm of justice, joy, love, and liberation. Dr. Lopez is a Harvard-educated educator. His doctorate degree focused on fostering ecosystems of healing through healing-centered youth development, healing-centered leadership, and healing-centered research through emancipatory inquiry. Justice is a recipient of multiple awards and fellowships, including the Harvard Alumni Turner Cooper Award for People First Practice in Education, the Gates Foundation Create Fellowship for Culturally Responsive Education, and the Carter G. Woodson Award for Educational Leadership, and more. Welcome, Dr. Lopez. All right, the next person up needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce him as the MC, the Master of Curriculum, Kareem McQuilkin. I am passing the mic to you, brother.
Peace, Javella. I never heard the Ivan Van Sertima. We gotta talk about that tomorrow. Ivan Van Sertima when I first started reading his literature. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to become a social studies teacher. So we gotta talk about that.
It came before Columbus.
Yes, yep. So yeah, shout out to everybody that's here on the call. everybody in the chat that's always showing up for us and showing love. And right now, we know community is what's going to equip us to dismantle systems of oppression. And we know that there are attacks on our existence of Black and brown people, right, within this country led by the current presidential regime. But we know collaboration and community is what's going to get us through and give us the strength to continue to fight. And knowing that we got Luis and Mario out in Colorado, meeting Dr. Lopez, who's up in the Bronx right now, meeting for the first time. That just means that we're strengthening ourselves in numbers through collaboration. So I'm excited to get this conversation started. So, Luis, I want to mention one more thing. You are making history tonight. You are the first student that has been featured on a We Do It for the Culture webinar. And I believe we're about 8 webinars in. And every year is the year of student voice. And you are breaking barriers right now, and we want to continue to be able to be in conversation with you and students like yourself through the work that we do at We Do It for the Culture. So much respect to you. So we're gonna get started with the conversation tonight. That's what you all came for. Mario, I am going to come to you first to answer this question for me, right? Who is Mario Reyes, and how did your life experience shape who you are today? Can you share a personal story with us?
Ooh, okay. Well, hello everyone. Thank you all for joining us. Just know all of my love always to teachers everywhere. Teachers have one of the most difficult jobs in the world. So all my love and respect to all of you who are taking time out of your day to continue to learn how to serve our students better. But me, my name is Mario. I'm the fourth in my family, and I'm originally from Austin, Texas. I would say, so I'm not long-winded. I would say much of my life has been very much shaped by my two parents, my mom and my dad, having come from their specific backgrounds, where my dad, being a migrant worker, being from the border, and just really traveling a lot to provide for his family. They would travel to Michigan, to the fields of Michigan, and cultivate corn there, and then they would travel back to Texas in the wintertime after they were there all summer. So that really cultivated his work ethic, which he then passed on to me, which is wake up early, work hard all day, and go to bed extremely tired. And, I've had to come to terms with maybe that's not always the healthiest thing. I have to tell my dad, maybe sometimes we should get some rest. But that's the work ethic that my father comes from. So that has cultivated me. In terms of my mom is the smartest person I know, with no college degree, barely graduated high school, no support, lost her mother when she was young. And she made it her mission every day to make sure that she was supplying for me and my sisters, working hard. And that's also the work ethic that she instilled in me. So that is what I come from. That is what I try to live out. And then the last thing I'll say is that I'm very much shaped as well by my queer experiences and being a gay man and growing up in that respect. And so all of these factors have contributed to who I am today.
Nice. Thank you, Mario. And can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you're currently leading?
Yes, there's so much work, so much work. I would say first here at the school, one, I train teachers in critical literacies. So really having teachers think about ways that we move away from worksheets and hour-long lectures, and instead, how do we get into texts that are difficult and complicated and challenge students to think about the world? How is it that we get out into the world and consider reading as fluid and dynamic and not just necessarily cracking open a book, although we should be doing that, but that we see reading in all parts of our lives. I also help run the Environmental Fellowship, which Luis is a part of, and I'm just so happy that Luis is able to showcase some of his insights tonight. But the fellowship is a 6-month program in which our students study climate change extremely closely. Our school is nested within one of the most polluted zip codes in America, the 80216 zip code of Commerce City in Globeville, Elyria, Swansea, and North Denver. And so with that, we have our students think about, why is it that these factories are allowed to continue to pollute at ridiculous rates? They're polluting sulfur benzene, carbon dioxide, methane into the air constantly. And it is primarily Hispanic families in these communities who are facing the consequences of that. So we try to understand why these things happen. And then last thing that I will say is, yeah, I also help run an eco-socialist magazine called Dystopian Times. This is our attempt at fusing politics and art, and making it accessible, making socialist ideas accessible for a new generation. Because even though, as you mentioned, Kareem, a lot of evil is being led by the current regime, this regime is in place because of many reasons, one being our capitalist system, and that will continue to produce these results and these crises that we're in constantly. So we must face the root.
Yes, thank you for lifting that up, Mario. And I'm excited to get a little bit more into that conversation as we discuss the Por La Cultura curriculum. So shout out to you for all of the amazing work that you're doing to transform this world that we live in. Luis, I'm gonna come to you next. All right. So I want to know, who is Luis Araluce, and how did your experiences shape who you are today?
All right, I'm Luis Araluce, and I'm an 18-year-old senior here in Denver. I'm an environmental fellow and I'm a youth activist. I've always cared about those type of stuff because growing up, my parents showed me that it's not about where you are, but it's about the community that you're in. So I've always just tried to uplift everyone around me, sometimes even forgetting about myself because my parents taught me to value the area and not really what's going on around it. And what's it called? Currently, I'm working on this project in an internship with Sid, who runs a Moonshell cooperation where it is a co-owned business. And I'm currently trying to make my own co-owned business with my friend Angelo, where I'm going to make a community garden where it is grown with no carcinogens, no GMOs, no what's it called? No parasitics or anything like that. And it's just going to be very natural and healthy food. And that's one way that I'm going to try to help the environment and the people around it.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing that, right? Y'all making me, recognize how much, and I need to learn a lot more about how much my lifestyle may be contributing to damaging the environment, right? My kids, they're in elementary school, and they learning a lot about that, and they ask me a lot of questions, and they interrogate me about, like, we recycle, but I know there are things that we can be doing beyond that to make sure we keep our environment we keep our environment pure as we possibly can. So thank you, Luis. All right, so we're gonna go from Denver over to New York City. All right, so we're gonna hop on the plane real quick. Who is Dr. Justice Lopez? And how did your life experience shape who you are today? And can you share a personal story with us?
Hey, peace, brother Kareem. Took it on in from New
Peace,
York, Boogie
peace.
Down Bronx. What's good, family? Brother Luis, I'm so encouraged by your journey and your story. Thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. And Mario as well. I'm really encouraged by both of your journeys and stories. Peace, y'all. My name is Justice. As Sister Jamila mentioned earlier, I'm a son, a brother, funfetti cupcake lover, and chocolate chip cookie lover too. I love both. I'm a DJ. My DJ name is DJ Fado. It's a double entendre. Fado en español in Spanish means lighthouse, and Pharaoh in Egyptian culture means connector to the divine, the Most High. And I believe that DJs and hip hop culture connects us to our highest forms of self. When I think about that fifth element of knowledge of self and hip hop culture. Um, I'm an educator, an organizer. My background, I appreciate that, Ed. Appreciate the wordplay. Appreciate you picking that up, fam. My background is in education and curriculum and instruction. I taught middle school, high school, social studies, humanities, worked in the nonprofit sector in space, higher ed, K through 12, kind of different landscapes and spaces and places, which ultimately led me to recently completed my doctoral studies at Harvard University, where I focused on emancipatory inquiry, healing centered leadership, healing centered youth development, And currently, at the moment, I consider myself a social impact entrepreneur. And what does that mean? It means that I'm working on a portfolio of various projects that really are deeply emotionally and spiritually aligned. So um, I support We Do It for the Culture with implementation in New York schools. If they get that new, that 101, we rocking there. And I support various other projects as well. Currently, I'm the director for teaching and learning at the Hip Hop Education Center. So I manage our portfolio and projects and look at what does it mean to embed hip hop based education globally and nationally in various contexts and spaces. Support dear brother Principal Ra with knowledge and implementing knowledge navigation and supporting with chronic absenteeism. But I'm also an independent hip hop entrepreneur. DJing is something that really brings me a lot of joy in my life. And it also is something that provides a sense of direction. So when I look at being a hip hop social entrepreneur artist, I DJ a lot of events too and host various elements and things that have really provided guidance and context in my life. So that's me, y'all. Really thankful to be here in this space, in this context, to learn with and alongside y'all and just deeply, deeply grateful for you all.
Yo, appreciate you so much, Dr. Lopez. And look, if y'all ever want a keynote speaker that's going to DJ and give you a keynote at the same time, what I saw, I don't think I ever saw anybody do that before, and somebody who has teaching experience. So yeah, I could legendary work that everybody's doing at the same time. You remember that song, right? Was that Future at the same time? All right, so we're gonna come back. We're gonna fly back to Denver. So everybody that's here, Mario, we're gonna be releasing our Por La Cultura lesson series tomorrow. So be on the lookout in your emails for some fresh new lessons. And Mario is the designer of the Por La Cultura lesson series. So, Mario, can you tell us what inspired you as you developed Por La Cultura, and why was it important to center Hispanic, Chicano, and Latinx voices in this lesson series? And as you share that story, can you also explain why it's so important to have Luis here with us today?
Hmm. Well, I hope everybody participating enjoys the curriculum. If you check it out, enjoy some of the lesson. I'm always open to feedback, so please let us know what you like and what you don't like. But really, I would say the inspiration behind this set of lessons is a few things. One, whenever I'm thinking about curriculum that's needed or curriculum that should be showcased in classes because it doesn't always get an opportunity to, what I look at is one, my own life, my own interests, what I'm looking up on Instagram, what I'm reading about, which YouTube videos I'm watching, what books I'm reading, because those things matter, and we as educators and teachers should always be encouraged to look at our own literate lives and take inspiration from the media that we consume and bringing that into our classes. But really, it's also paying attention to what our students are talking about and listening to. So what I'll say first is, for example, with a lesson like archiving history, specifically Hispanic history, one point of that lesson is that oftentimes when we're taught Mexican history, Mexican American history, Latino history, whatever we want to call it, oftentimes it's usually in the context of a Spanish language classroom, and or it's something as surface level and as common as the Mexican American War, Cesar Chavez, who I'm sure many people have seen the news on that recently. And it's like, yeah, if these are our only examples, we're never truly engaging with our history in a deep enough way. And so one of the lessons, archiving our history, the idea is really that it's not only that we talk about which histories we should be talking about as Mexican Americans, but how is it that we archive this history? So the lesson is not even just the content, but what are the specific tools newspapers, zines, magazines from different Chicano neighborhoods that the neighborhoods are producing in order to archive their history. And so that was an important point to put into the lesson, because it's not even just that we can look up different historical Latino events or different Latino role models that we can cling to. Instead, are we teaching our students how they are archiving their own histories and giving them both digital and print ways to be able to practice archiving their family memories and histories? So that's one point. The next point that I'll say in kind of writing this curriculum and things that I think are important are that you'll see a few calls to J Balvin, Peso Pluma, just some of the more popular regional Mexican artists currently. And the idea with those lessons is that when we're trying to make something interesting for students, oftentimes we'll pick the hottest artist that's playing right now. It's also important that we take that a step further and we don't just bring in the hottest artists, but we look at why is it that they're the hottest artists? How do we bring in data points from the Billboard Hot 100 that show their statistics over the past, their revenue for their album has gone up over the past 2 years. So now we're bringing in math in addition to having to understand why this regional context is important in Mexico and why this genre of music has come in to play. Now we're looking at the history of instruments in Mexico. Now we're looking at the history of different genre types coming out of the region. So it's not just that we bring in the cool artist, it's that we build the context around the artist and teach that to our students. Because when we do that, then they become historians, they become scientists. We can start thinking about the different technologies that have changed to impact music over time. And so, yeah, I could go on about all that, but I would say those things to start. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. You did. And we're gonna come to Luis next. But before we go to Luis, why is it so important for us to have Luis in conversation with us today?
It's the same. It's like we have to have our youth, our people, our students with us in every conversation. When we're designing curriculum, what is it that y'all are engaged with? What are y'all wrestling with? What are y'all doing to think about or to have conversations for centering our students' interests, centering their passions, but most importantly, their opinions on what we're doing is absolutely critical. So having Luis here, who is not only active, but is such an incredible role model for other students. And he's been able to help morph and help transform other students' development, going from people who are apathetic to school to people who are more engaged. He's also seen other people's journeys. So he's also able to speak from those perspectives. That's why it's important.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Mario. So yeah, you definitely answered the question. And we're gonna come to you now, Luis. What do you think of when you hear the term por la cultura? What does Luis do por la cultura?
All right. When I think about por la cultura, I don't think about it as a verb. I think about it as an action. Like, for example, por la cultura is how I represent my culture and my community in a good way. I don't like bringing shame to the culture. I like people thinking that we're just normal people because I don't like the term of different races and stuff. I like knowing that everyone is just a person. And what I do por la cultura is I always try to open doors and just make people like know what's going on. And I always try to like bring everyone around me up so that they're all on the same page, because por la cultura is representing and also making sure that I'm keeping up everyone else that is la cultura. So yeah, to me, la cultura is a action, not a verb.
I love that. It's an action, right? It's an action, right? And it's not just we could say that we're doing things, right? We could talk about it, but we got to actually make moves and step out into the world that we live in to make a difference, right? It's more than just talking about it. So I love that, Luis. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we heard from the student. Now we're gonna come to the educator, the adult, the DJ, Dr. Lopez. What do you think of when you hear the term por la cultura? And what does social justice do por la cultura?
Oh, fam, this is this conversation is medicine. Building on what Brother Mario and Brother Lewis was sharing, you know, por la cultura, para la cultura is about it's a disposition, it's a mindset, it's a continuation, it's honoring legacy and ancestry, like Sister Jamila mentioned before in that beautiful introduction. It's alive, it's moving, it's growing, and I think about the context even of hip hop healing and SEL, and we do it for the culture. So much of hip hop culture is inextricably connected to the Latin diaspora, the Black Latin diaspora, right? When you think about reggaeton and its origins in Panama and then coming on over to Puerto Rico and then New York and the Bronx, and the sound of hip hop has always been deeply influenced by the Latin diaspora, particularly the Black Latin diaspora, and thinking about the Bronx and Rocksteady crew and breakdancers breaking and dancing and um Cold Crush Brothers and the Latin diaspora there, and Big Pun to Cardi B to, like, more modern context of even Bad Bunny on a global stage, influencing the world, the most streamed artists globally, and reggaeton and hip hop, this kind of these hip hop healing SEL elements going on a global national landscape, like Por Para La Cultura is that. Like, we do it for the culture. It's this global landscape. Like, Bad Bunny is the most listened to reggaeton global artist in the world, shattering records. Like, across the global landscape, fully in Spanish, like fully putting on for the culture, like unapologetically pulling up to PR and leading. Like, yo, when I went to por la cultura, para la cultura, like, what does it mean? It means like showing up. It means leading with love. It means embodying the principles of hip hop, peace, love, unity, and having fun. It's all of that. And hip hop embodies that. Like, hip hop is the praxis to that. When I think about this current landscape of how hip hop is the vehicle for having conversations about well-being, about collective thriving, about healing, and how reggaeton, por la cultura, para la cultura, is the most recent iteration of that genius. Like, reggaeton is the continuation of that Black Latin diasporic griot storytelling that has always been deeply healing, that has always embodied transformational SEL, right? These various terms that we've given to healing, well-being, collective thriving, flourishing, our communities have always been practicing that. It's an indigenous culture and practice. And I look at hip hop and por la cultura as an iteration of that, as a continuation of that brilliance, of that genius, of that lineage, of that way of disposition, right? As Brother Weiss mentioned, like, it's a verb, it's a vision, it's an action, it's a way of being, it's a way of moving, and hip hop has always embodied that. Like, hip hop has always embodied Para la cultura has always been for the culture, by the culture, led by youth culture, led by young people, right? I think about that's what it means. And it means, that kind of fifth element that I was mentioning before, knowledge of self, no history, no self, no history, no self, right? KNOW versus NO, right? And hip hop has always been the direct vehicle of understanding that. And para la cultura, that means, like, yo, I do it for the culture, I do it for the people, I do it for the lineage, I do it for the ancestry. And then what does social justice kind of do to contribute to that lineage, right? So my name is Justice. My IG gram is social justice. That's a double entendre. Social justice in the sense of, like, equity, liberation, etc., but also social in the sense of, like, community conversation and being social, because social transformation and social conversation lead to social liberation and ecosystems of
Well,
like
let me put a
love,
beat on.
justice.
Let me
Come
let me
on,
put a
man. We
beat on.
wasn't,
Let me put a beat on real
that's
quick.
para la cultura, man. We want to, and that's what it is, fam. That's what it is. And I love the chat of that kind of global Caribbean diasporic element, right? Like, you know, por la cultura, para la cultura, like DJ Kool Herc was a Jamaican static selector, and like the Jamaican influence of hip hop, right? The Cuban influence of hip hop, the Latin influence, the Caribbean influence of hip hop. Por la cultura is like acknowledging like hip hop is a global diasporic community, context, and culture that heals, that speaks truth to power, that transforms. So I can keep talking about this all day, but that's what that means for me and embodying that in everything that I do.
Yeah, yeah. I love that breakdown, right? And you mentioned the diaspora and the Bad Bunny performance. I remember when all the flags started coming, right? My family's Grenadian, and we saw the flag. The first thing is like, okay, well, where's Grenada? Oh, we made it, right? It's like this small island made it right to that big stage. And shout out to Bad Bunny for making sure everybody got represented. We see Sean the B teach for the culture with the Jamaican flag in there. I was in Costa Rica last year, and we were on the Caribbean seaside, and my wife, she's Jamaican, and her family, so her family members just moved down there. They were born in Jamaica and raised in Jamaica, her aunt and uncle, and just being there, you just see such a blend of cultures in this one small area, but it's like thriving and bursting with culture. So yeah, shout out to that breakdown that you just had in praxis. I gotta add that to my repertoire. I like the way you put that in there. Praxis. All right. So we're gonna come back to you, Mario. Justice mentioned social emotional learning and transformative social emotional learning to be exact. And we know that we try to bring all of our lessons back to social emotional learning. And we know transformative social emotional learning goes a little bit deeper, right? So, how does Por La Cultura connect culturally rooted learning to transformative social emotional learning, especially around those competencies of belonging, identity, and mental health?
Hmm. I think I think first of all, there's something really healing in being able to provide a curriculum or examples or mentor texts that teach a student about their own, or at least give an entryway for a student's own history and to learn something new about where they come from. Because oftentimes what this capitalist society does, what our education system does, is it'll splice and split us into singular parts that become siloed and vacuumed off from everything. And within that, there's an inherent loneliness to it, to this siloing off. So the more that we're able to branch, not only relationally make branches between students with each other in the same class, but also the more that we're able to branch intergenerationally and have students think about themselves not just as material time beings that exist now, but time beings that come of lineages of past and present. There's something that is really unifying and less isolating about knowing that that we come from, as who said it earlier? Someone said, we come from people who move mountains. I like how Jamila said that earlier. And so we should be offering curriculum that allows students to think temporally in that way, where we are dragging ourselves from past to present and future. I think too, y'all, I don't know about y'all's schools or y'all's lives or worlds, but shit is, oh, I apologize. Things are just really, really serious sometimes. So I think with these lessons, it's really important just to have fun and to share music with each other, and what it is to just take 10 to 15 minutes where we sit and we listen to each other's playlists that we've created, playlists that are created based on your cultural background or your cultural identity. And that's how we share and that's how we storytell. So bringing that into the classroom, I think, is also extremely powerful and healing. And the last thing I'll say that's really important for SEL and social emotional learning is, I think there's actually a lot of power in subtraction and reduction. So oftentimes as teachers, especially advisory teachers, we're having to come up with new graphic organizers, new lessons, new interesting this, new interesting that. And it's like sometimes the best social emotional learning lesson that can take place, sometimes the best culturally relevant lesson that can take place is when you sit down with your kids in a circle, you look at them in the eye, and you have a conversation, period. And there's your SEL lesson right there. So those are the things that I would say on transformative learning in the classroom.
Yeah, thank you. And that's why all of our lessons start off with that cipher, right? Where we hope teachers do exactly that, sit with their students in a circle. And you mentioned the word joy, right? A lot of these topics can be very heavy, but we know as a people, we have always been able to find a way to find joy, even in the most challenging and turbulent times. That's how hip hop was birthed, right? Hip hop was birthed when the Bronx was literally burning down, right? And through all of that chaos and turmoil, like arose from the concrete, hip hop was birthed. So yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much for lifting that up, Mario. You mentioned, capitalism again, right? And we got to find new ways, new ways to imagine how this world can exist and how we could be more cooperative with each other. And we hope that things like transformative social emotional learning gives us an opportunity to value each other, right, more than we value the dollar. So yeah, thank you, Mario. So Luis, we are gonna come to you next. What does it feel like for you as a student, right, when you see Hispanic, Chicano, and Latinx experiences and identities or voices reflected in your school curriculum, right? And can you share maybe a personal story with us about a time when you felt like in school your culture and your existence was being honored and celebrated?
All right. So when I hear about like my own cultural things in the curriculum, it actually gets me kind of excited and interested because it's more entertaining and I feel like it's easier to remember because it shifts it away from just learning to learn it for school to like I'm actually learning about myself and my culture and where I came from. So I feel like it fully switches it because, for example, I was taking a US history class where we were mainly focusing on the American Revolution and just stuff like that. And I felt like it didn't really matter and it wasn't entertaining. But the second that he started talking about Pancho Villa's revolution, it just fully engaged me. And I started doing research on my own in my at my house, like outside of school hours and stuff. And I just felt like it was connected to me in some way, and it just made me very proud to see how he fought and how he actually brought the good things. And um, for example, another example, I was at what was his name? Because his name is also Pancho, but
Poncho. I think you can, yeah. We're at a community meeting for a data center that's going up in the neighborhood that Luis attended. But yeah, how did that
okay.
impact you?
All right, so during that, we were researching it, and I just saw all the statistics on how it was affecting people and how it was affecting the communities. But we ended up going to a meeting at a school to talk to the people that it was affecting in real time. And I don't know, I just saw a whole bunch of people like that were Hispanic and Latino and stuff like that, and a whole bunch of colored people. And it just felt like hearing their opinions straight from their mouths and seeing them like it brought emotion to it and like it made me actually want to do something and use my voice to advocate for them. And yeah, I just feel like seeing the type of people that they're harming, it just brings a lot more pieces to it. And yeah, I just feel like seeing my own culture and stuff, it just brings out my emotions and makes me want to participate more.
Yeah, yeah. Thank yeah, thank you for sharing that, Luis. And that and the when I heard you share the story about the data center going up and attending that meeting, right? Sometimes we can read about things and we can see things on the news, but when we actually meet the people it's impacting, right, it does something to our spirits and hopefully moves us to want to make a difference, right? And I've been reading this past week a book with my children related to artificial intelligence, and it speaks about the damage that data centers are doing, and then also the new jobs of the future that would be related to AI, right? And there's a conflict to an extent, and but the book is written in a way for children to engage in that story. So yeah, that's very relevant, right? Also relevant to our identities, and then also relevant to our experiences, because the way you're experiencing the world at 18 is similar to the way I experienced it at 18, but also very different, right? Artificial intelligence wasn't around when I was your age. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. All right. Dr. Lopez, we're gonna come back around to you. So you speak a lot about healing, being healing centered, right? And we know that could span from leadership to teaching to being a parent to being a son, a daughter. Um, so how might Por La Cultura, or in what ways do you see Por La Cultura creating an ecosystem of healing for students, teachers, families, through healing centered youth development and leadership, or whatever else you think of when you hear that term healing centered?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, fam. I'm gonna bring up what Mario had mentioned about like archiving. He mentioned something about archiving and the importance of archiving, and that's so important because if we don't tell our history, stories, and narratives, other people will tell them for us. And we see that in this current violent authoritarian regime, that books are literally being burnt, that teachers are literally being fired, that people are being reprimanded for speaking truth. Like it's not even like an alternative fact or like not, no, this is truth. Like these are people's lived experiences and narratives, right? So I just want to bring into the space my dear sister, Dr. Yolanda Shilly Ruiz, and she talks about archaeology of self. And when I think about healing centered leadership, when I think about healing centered leaders, when I think about healing, she is the praxis and practice and epitome of that. And Yoli, Dr. Yolanda City Ruiz, really talks about archaeology of self as a core critical approach towards towards healing centered leadership, towards you see, I see Shauna in the chat, I see Ed, shout out to the love for Dr. Yoli. Um, you know, archaeology and storytelling and our archaeology of self is so inextricably connected to healing and that praxis of liberation, etc. So that's one kind of domain and element. Coupled with archaeology and archaeology of self and narrative and storytelling, what I see Para La Cultura doing in the context of hip hop and healing and leadership and everything else in between is tying back in to what I was mentioning before that these are deeply Afro-Latin indigenous practices already. Hip hop has always been a healing praxis and practice. It has just gone by different names and different centuries and generations. So when I think about the beauty of Para la Cultura and what's unfolding with healing centered leadership, I look at it in the preface and prefix of the remix. If you look at anything that starts with the preface of RE, remix, return to, reflection, all these words that start with the RE is a preface for to return back to. That's what that essentially means. And when I think about remix is about returning back to what? Well, returning back to self, returning back to cultura, returning back to liberation, returning back to love. And a lot of healing work, fam, a lot of it is about healing inner child work, like healing our inner child, like even clinical and non-clinical approaches, when you have various conversations in various contexts and spaces, a lot of it comes back to what's the context, spaces, and places we experience as a young person, and how are we leaning into that? How are we experiencing that? How are we affirmed through that? How are we healing through that? How are we nurtured through that? And what I see Para La Cultura doing is ancestral like healing work. Like I see myself reflected. It is archaeology of self. It is lessons and stories and narratives, etc. And hip hop is the vehicle and conduit to that, right? When I think about hip hop, social and emotional health and healing and healing mixtapes, right? Dear shout out to my brother Dr. Ian Levy, who talks a lot about like hip hop healing and therapy, right? Like when I think about Para La Cultura, it's about doing so in a way that honors the diaspora, that honors the beauty of the diaspora. Thinking about, yeah, dear brother Dr. Raphael Travers, right? The healing power of hip hop. Like Ralph was a dear component of my doctoral thesis of thinking about that healing power of hip hop and youth culture. Um, and returning back to that. And so much of that has been driven by like hip hop has always been youth culture, right? It's always been led by youth. And Nina Simone um, has is one of my favorite artists of all time, and she has a lot of different quotes. And one of her quotes is, "The artist's role is to reflect the times." And another one of her favorite quotes is, "The artist's role is to make the revolution irresistible." And that's what I see with Para La Cultura. That's what I see with We Do It for the Culture. That's what I see with hip hop. That's what I see with reggaeton. That's what I see with all of these elements and practices of healing. It's to make the revolution irresistible. And the revolution is like we have a right to rest. Like we have a right to feel joy. We have a right to heal. We have a right to have basic needs and decency like accessible to us. We have the rights for all of those things. And hip hop, MCing, DJing, breakdancing, artists, all of the elements have always been the leaders and the conduits of that praxis to healing to this day. So that's what I think of, when posed with that beautiful question and what's unfolding in this moment of time.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you for dropping all of that knowledge, Dr. Justice. So I see that the chat was getting lit up. Dr. Ian P. Levy and Dr. Raphael Travis, The Healing Power of Hip Hop. I think Jamila dropped in there. Dr. Yoli Celie Ruiz's book in there, Archaeology of Self, correct? Dr. Justice Lopez. Yep. So be on the lookout for that. Yes, that's what I love about community and being here with all of you today, right? We are learning about new people, making new connections, and that's how we keep ourselves energized. So I know I have another question, but I want to make sure I honor and respect all of our guests. Are there any questions that we have in the chat right now, Jamila?
I didn't see any questions in the chat. A few people asked about recording. We will be sending this out to everybody with some additional resources. And also, again, just want to shout out the new lessons that are coming. Por La Cultura will be coming to We Do It for the Culture this week. So we'll drop the website in the chat. But yeah, please drop your questions in the chat, or you can use the Q&A feature so that you can engage with some of our amazing guests.
Yes. And while we wait for any of those questions to come through, actually, I see. Oh, yep, Ed, yep. It's a lot of excitement around those lessons. Yes, be on the lookout for that. And this is just part one. This is just part one of the series. All right.
Can
So
we give
we
a little
can.
preview? Can we give a little preview? We got the we got the architect here. We got Mario here. We're dropping 3 lessons this week. So maybe Kareem and Mario give us a little preview. What's dropping this week?
Yeah, so I think we got a senior on the call right now, and we know that this is college admissions. People are still applying, acceptance letters. So can you tell us a little bit about the college application lesson, Mario, and why that particular lesson was created as a part of the Por La Cultura series?
Yeah. Well, when I was speaking with some students that I work with about what type of lessons they think we should put in this series, one of the questions I asked was, what skills do you feel like you're not really being taught, but is still kind of expected of you as an adult? And they said applications, college applications, setting up or being prepared for interviews and things like that. At our school, we have a pretty strong post-secondary program. So we're constantly helping and supporting our students think about what's coming after. So a lot of the inspiration for this lesson was that, but then also thinking about my own experience with applying to college and um, gaps in my parents' ability to help me in understanding financial aid and things like that. Not every school has a counselor that's able to allocate time. And so really what this lesson is meant to be is one where we can open up the conversation of college applications. And also, I believe there's a side note in there that, this lesson can be used for any type of application, any type of trying to get into a trade school, trying to get into technical school, because we don't only just push college. We like to push all kinds of pathways. But it's really getting students thinking about how is it that I synthesize personal information, execute an introduction and an interview really well, and how is it that I organize my time and my calendar accordingly so that I can follow up with deadlines and dates. Oftentimes, with immigrant families or with families who have often struggled just to get by paycheck to paycheck. Oftentimes, those skills of financial literacy are not passed down. And so this is a way and an opportunity for students to open up that conversation, learn some hard skills, and get some practice in a pretty low stakes setting such as advisory.
Yeah.
Nice, nice.
So we got another question. Principal Grevenberg asked, in the curriculum, will young people learn about the disruptors, por la cultura? Are there places where students will learn about the history that they're not taught that can give them some pride about disruptors that look like them? That's a great question. And I know that, and I can't remember the title, but I do remember just growing up listening to This Is for the Raza. Like, I remember that track that came on, and I used to bump that real hard on Yo MTV Raps. But if you could talk a little bit about the lesson where you're focusing on La Raza in the Por La Cultura series.
Yeah, I would say there's a few lessons. One, the powerful Latinx woman, I think is a really good one. We didn't have a Latino voice here today, and we should always have Latino voices. But that's an opportunity to really think about some powerful women role models that our students can discuss. And then the archiving Raza history, that's a powerful one because what that does is that shows how a community back, I believe it was in the 80s or 90s, how a specific community was using a newspaper as a form of organizing community so that they would have people come in and write pieces, but that was also a way to share stories. But then it was also a way to educate and get news going on in the neighborhood out to residents. And so that was their form of change making as well as archiving histories within the community. And then I was looking at one more powerful people. Oh, the practicing protest, I hope is also another lesson that is that gets our students to think critically and to be proud about who they are, knowing that they come from a lineage of resistance. And also that they themselves can think through a specific issue that they would like to resist and or that they would like to make change happen in, and that they can think through an actual plan, an action plan or a way of organizing students or community members in order to make change with that specific issue. So that's another lesson.
Awesome. So y'all just got a sneak preview. You got to go to wedoitfortheculture.com and sign up so you can get all the lessons under our new series, Por La Cultura. All right. Are there any other questions in the chat before we close out? All right. No, I just want to thank all of you for just your energy this evening. Luis, I'm trying to be like you when I grow up. I just love the work that you're doing, community garden, making sure there's no pesticides or chemicals or anything that's going to damage our body. So being true to the land that you're cultivating and doing it for your culture. I think it's just powerful. And I know you're going to be, doing some amazing things and just keeping that legacy going. So thank you so much, Luis. Thank you, Mario, for your mentorship of Luis and bringing him into the space and all the brilliance that you bring to the work that you're doing and to We Do It for the Culture. And Dr. Lopez, you already know, man. Like even if I'm feeling just a little bit tired, you know, I get around you and the energy goes up to all the way up, all the way up. And so I'm just really grateful for the energy that you bring. It's a very healing energy, and just an excitement, and you know, bringing that to this work is so much needed, especially during these times. So I just appreciate all of you, and I'm gonna turn it back over to the MC, Karima Quilkin, to take us out. Big up to all the educators. Thank you for everything you all are doing for the culture. Check out the lessons that are dropping this week, and you will receive a synopsis of today, in addition to some resources and that invite to join We Do It for the Culture, so that you can access the lessons. All right, Kareem, I'm shutting it up.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody, Jamila, right, Luis, Mario, Dr. Lopez, you know, your energy that you all bring to just life in general, right? Because we're not just educators, right? This is our life. Like this is something that we love, and it spreads. It's not a profession for us, right? And we need these types of spaces so we can spread this message, not just in the spaces that we occupy, but when we go out on our missions, right? We carry that energy, right? Knowing Dr. Lopez exists gives me energy. Knowing Luis exists, knowing Mario exists, that gives me energy. Knowing Jamila exists, it gives me energy even when y'all are not physically present in a space with me. So I just want to thank y'all all for that, and Mario for designing these lessons, Luis for making history, and yeah, you know. And before what'd you say, Jamila?
Liz Youngblood in the
Oh, and
chat.
Liz, yes, Liz Youngblood, Steven, our producer. You know, shout out to everybody and Teach for the Culture, Shauna B, you know, for always being on with us and showing love. And, you know, just before we close out, you know, I'll start off with Mario, Luis, and then Dr. Lopez. Like, is there anything you want to share before we close out? One of the questions I didn't get to was the role that ICE is currently playing in our nation, and what Por La Cultura, transformative social emotional learning, what role can that play in helping us combat the role that ICE is currently playing in our nation? And if you could just touch on that before we close out, I think it's very important.
Yeah. I think, first of all, there's nothing wise that I have to say when it comes to ICE terrorism. I think it really is, are we showing up every day and providing as much love and safety as we can for our students? I know things are really complicated with certain schools on what they can say, what they can post, if they can be in support of, you know, immigrants in the community or not, and if that makes them a target. I know these things are really tricky. And so just all my love and respect to educators for showing up and fighting this fight in this crazy time we live in. Um, I think I think the most important thing that we can do is teach history, and specifically from a framework of capitalism, imperialism. If we can understand the colonial roots of slave catchers going to the Texas Rangers, going to the police force, going to now ICE terrorism, if we can trace the way that capitalism continues to transform itself and uh, create new globalized networks that continue to bring us into different crises. If we can understand that our burning of fossil fuels come from fossil fuel companies and owners who refuse to give up power, if we can understand the root of things, we have a much better time navigating our present and our future. So we must know our history. We must know our history of colonization. We must understand our relationship to the planet. Luis, any thoughts to close out?
All right, so honestly, I feel like knowing my history is very important because it helps me know that I'm not supposed to be oppressed and that I'm like everybody else. Everybody is just a human being that deserves the same equal treatment. And it's important to know my history because of this, because without it, I feel like I would have thought that I deserved to be oppressed and that
Mm.
maybe that's just the way that everything is.
Mm, that's real. Thank you, Luis. And Dr. J.
Yeah, fam, what a tender question. My heart, soul, and spirit are with those currently navigating the state-sanctioned violence of this domestic terrorist organization known as ICE under this violent authoritarian regime um, in the divided states of America, and knowing that it is the most current iteration of state-sanctioned violence, um, tracing back to the inception of this country that constantly minoritized and marginalized individuals are constantly utilized as a scapegoat to a problem for our country's inability to reconcile and reckon with its inability um, to live up to the ideals, morals, and values that it espouses to have. And there really are no words for the violence and the treatment of people and what I've seen and how people are living in fear. And coupled with that, when I think about hip hop, reggaeton, we do it for the culture, healing, and everything else in between. Hip hop has always spoken truth to power. The elements of hip hop have always been a counterculture to violent institutions and systems of oppression. From the Bronx literally burning arsonry to the modern day context of state sanctioned terrorism. And it's not to conflate those or say that they're the same, it's to say that state sanctioned violence and the ways in which the empire will constantly perpetuate violence, hip hop has always been the forefront of that countercultural revolution. And what I'm seeing now is para la cultura, reggaeton, hip hop, healing, being a critical praxis of revolutionary rebellion in that moment. And that's going to look very different in different contexts and spaces. It's about knowing your rights, it's about standing up for one another. It's about taking your camera out and filming when you see something being done wrong. It's about speaking truth to power. It's about school leaders standing on business, like straight up. Like if you're a leader of the school, I know it's hard, and we need you to stand on business. Like we need you to stand on business. If ICE agents are coming into a space unannounced and uninvited, that's a violation. Like stand on business. We need people to stand on business. Hip hop has always stood on business. Hip hop has always been the culture that stands on business. Embody that and live it. And I send love and restoration, to all those who are navigating violent institutions of harm. And may we collectively work towards healing, love, and liberation in this generation and the next.
Thank you. Well said. Well said. So, we here to lift each other up, and we will overcome. We will, right? Because history has shown us, our ancestors have given us the blueprint. So, yeah, I'm a believer. So we gonna not just make it through, but we gonna thrive when we get through. So yeah, we will see everybody who was here and at our next webinar. But be on the lookout, like Jamila said, in your inbox for part 1 of our Por La Cultura lesson series. Hope everybody has a great night, and we will talk to you all soon. Bless.
Thank y'all.
Thank you
Thank you.
all.
Thank y'all.
Much love.
Much love. Much love.